I'm 58 years old now, and I guess I'm finally tired of carrying this alone. I never thought I'd say any of this out loud, not after the promises I made to myself and the promises my father made me keep. But the older I get, the heavier this memory feels, like time presses down harder instead of letting things fade. I don't sleep much anymore, and when I do, I still hear the walls breathing. That's how I know this story isn't finished with me. What happened took place more than 40 years ago, back when I still thought the world was simple and houses were just houses. I grew up in a small town called Ridgetop, tucked far out in the northern woods. Not the kind of woods you'd hike just for fun. These were old trees, tall and crowded, letting only thin lines of sunlight reach the ground. People kept to themselves, and kids like me learned early that the forest could be strange sometimes. Still, it was home. Quiet, steady, and predictable. Or at least I thought it was. Back then, my father worked long shifts at a mill 2 towns over, and I remember how tired he always looked when he came through the door. He wasn't mean, just distant, like his thoughts lived somewhere deeper than the rest of us could reach. He spent most nights sitting in his old chair, staring at the walls like he was waiting for them to move. I didn't understand that look until much later. I didn't understand the rules he repeated every night either. No walking around after dark, no talking near the walls, no standing too close to the vents. I thought every kid's father had strange rules like that. Life back then felt slow, like the whole town breathed with one long, quiet rhythm. Mornings smelled like cold pine and dirt. Evenings carried the sound of distant creek water and the wind pushing through old branches. I used to sit on the porch steps and listen to that wind, thinking nothing in the world could ever disturb the peace of that place. It feels almost strange remembering it now, how normal everything seemed before the house showed me what lived inside it. The first shift was small, so small I missed it at the time. People in town started mentioning odd things: cattle acting skittish, dogs refusing to go near tree lines, strange scratches showing up on shed doors. Nobody called it danger, they just called it one of those things. Like the woods did this sort of stuff now and then. But I remember the look in the adults' eyes. They were worried, and they didn't want kids like me noticing. My father grew even quieter during those weeks. Some nights he didn't sleep at all. I'd hear him walking the hallway slow and careful, like he didn't want the boards to make a sound. He'd rest his hand on the wall sometimes, like he was listening to it. I didn't know why he did that, but even at my age I could feel something heavy sitting between the wooden beams of that house, something that didn't belong to us. I didn't have the words for it back then, but I know now what that feeling was. Unease that didn't fit the moment, a wrongness without shape, a worry I couldn't explain. And the truth is, that uneasy feeling never left. Not really. Even now, decades later, I can still feel the way the air changed inside that house. I can still remember how the silence felt too thick, like it was waiting to break open. I guess that's why I'm telling this now, because what I found inside those walls wasn't just a creature. It wasn't just fear or trauma or memory. It was something that knew me, something that had been there far longer than any of us understood. And the night I finally heard it whisper back, that was when everything I believed about my home, my family, and myself began to crack. The night I heard it whisper back stayed with me, and that memory pulls me straight into the things I used to ignore, things about my family I didn't understand until it was already too late. Looking back, the signs were always there. I just didn't know how to read them. I didn't know how much my father had been keeping from me. My family had lived in that house for 3 generations. My grandfather built it himself, piece by piece, using old timber he hauled in from the woods behind the property. People used to say he worked too fast, too quiet, like he didn't want anyone watching him. By the time I was born, the house already felt older than any of us. The floors groaned in places that didn't make sense, and the walls always seemed a little warmer than they should have been, even in winter. My father never explained it. He just said the house had its moods. My mother died young, so most of what I remember is just me and my father trying to fill the empty spaces she left behind. He never talked about her much. He never talked about anything, really. He was the kind of man who kept his thoughts locked behind his eyes, and the older I got, the more I realized he wasn't distant. He was scared, not of life or work or responsibility. He was scared of the house, not in a loud way, not in a panicked way. It was quieter than that, deeper than that. Like the house knew him, and he was careful not to upset it. He used to check the walls every night, not for leaks or cracks, though that's what he told anyone who asked. He checked them like a person checks on a sleeping child, gently, slowly, listening for any change in the breathing. When I was little, I thought all dads did that it was normal for fathers to press their ear against the drywall and close their eyes like they were waiting for a voice to come through. He made me promise to never do the same. "You don't listen to the walls," he'd say. "You let them stay quiet." There were other rules, too. No running in the hallway after dark. No leaving my bedroom door open at night. No whistling indoors. No tapping on anything wooden. "Sound carries strange in old houses," he'd explain. But he never said what it carried to. My earliest memory of something being wrong goes back to when I was 7. I remember waking up one night because someone was crying in the walls. The sound was soft, almost like a humming, and when I told my father about it the next morning, he looked at me with this deep, tired sadness. Not fear, just sadness. He told me never to mention it again. "Sometimes the house remembers things," he whispered. "You don't answer it." He never raised his voice, but the way he said it made me feel smaller than I'd ever felt before. That was the first moment I realized the house wasn't just a home. It was something we lived beside, not inside. Something my father had already learned to respect. As the years went on, he aged fast. His hair grayed early, and his shoulders carried a weight I didn't understand then. He walked slower, slept lighter, talked less. And every night before bed, he placed his hand on the same section of wall near the living room, the one spot he never let me touch. He'd stay there a long time, breathing slow and steady, almost like he was waiting for something to respond. I asked him once why he did that. He just said, "Because it listens." Back then, I didn't know what he meant. But the night he died, the house was silent, completely silent. Not a creak, not a shift, not a whisper. And when I inherited the place, I thought the silence meant peace. I didn't realize it was only waiting. The first night I slept there alone as an adult, I heard something inside that same section of wall. Something moving like it had been waiting for me to come home. I thought I was prepared to be back in the house, but the truth is, nothing prepares you for returning to a place that still feels alive. The noise I heard that first night, soft movement inside the exact section of wall my father always touched, stayed with me the whole drive back from town the next morning. Even the air felt heavier when I pulled into the old gravel driveway, like the trees were leaning in closer than they used to, listening the way the house did. The place hadn't changed much since the day my father died. The porch still sagged a little in the middle. The windows still reflected the trees behind me instead of the sky above. The boards still felt warm under my hand, even though the air was cold. But standing there again, older now, I realized how wrong it all looked. Not broken, not abandoned, just watching. When I unlocked the front door, the hinges groaned in a slow, heavy way, almost like a sigh. The smell inside hit me right away, a mix of old wood, dust, and something sharp under the surface, something like copper. I tried not to think about it. I kept telling myself it was just age, or the pipes, or the memory of my childhood playing tricks on me. But the house wasn't quiet this time, not like the night it had stayed still for my father's passing. Instead, the silence shifted around me, like the house was adjusting itself now that I was back. I could hear small sounds inside the walls, too soft to be animals, too steady to be anything random. A scrape, a breath, something shifting its weight. I set my bags down in the hallway, and the floorboards creaked in reply. My father always said the house talked in its own way. But this didn't sound like talking. It sounded like pacing. I walked room to room, trying to remind myself of the way things used to look. My old bedroom, with the faded wallpaper I'd picked out at 8 years old. The kitchen where my father used to make breakfast before his long shifts. The living room with the wall he always touched, the one he guarded with quiet fear. That wall felt colder now, even though everything else felt warm. When I put my hand against it, something I never dared do as a child, I felt the faintest movement under the surface. Not a vibration, not a settling beam, something alive shifting just out of reach. I pulled my hand back fast, more out of instinct than fear, though fear wasn't far behind. That night, when the woods outside grew still and the house settled into its usual breathing rhythm, I sat on the edge of my bed and listened. At first there was just quiet. Then the soft brushing sound returned, moving slowly along the inside of the wall, tracing the length of the hallway like footsteps. Not heavy ones, not rushed ones, careful ones, measured, like someone trying to match the way I walked earlier. I tried to sleep, but the sound followed me no matter which way I turned. Every time I moved, the noise shifted too, pausing when I paused, continuing when I did. And the longer I lay there, the more I realized it wasn't just moving, it was learning. By midnight, I heard a slow dragging sound behind the wall near my head, a dragging that stopped exactly when my breathing changed. I held my breath without meaning to, and that's when something tapped the wall twice. Not loud, not threatening, just enough to let me know it was right there, inches away. And when I finally whispered, "Who's there?" the thing inside the wall tapped back, the same rhythm I used as a child. I realized the tapping wasn't just copying me now. It was repeating the exact patterns of my childhood footsteps, ones I hadn't made in decades. The tapping from inside the wall stayed with me long after it stopped. I kept hearing it in my head, repeating the same old rhythm I used to make when I was a kid running down that hallway. I don't know how long I sat there on the edge of my bed, staring into the dark, waiting for it to happen again. Part of me hoped it was just the house settling, some strange coincidence. But deep down, I already knew better. When morning came, I walked into the hallway, half afraid something would be waiting for me. The air felt colder there, like the house hadn't warmed up yet, even though the heater had been running all night. I knelt by the section of wall where the tapping had answered me, and for a second I thought I heard breathing, slow, steady, and way too close. That was the moment the first real fear hit me. Not panic, not terror, just a quiet sinking fear that something had been listening the entire time. I told myself I needed to check the house, to look for loose boards, broken pipes, animals, anything that made sense. So I went room to room, paying attention to the smallest details. Scratches I didn't remember, wood that looked newer than the rest, places where the paint seemed thinner, like something rubbed against it from the inside. When I reached the living room, I noticed something I had never seen before. A small, perfect circle in the wall, no bigger than the tip of my finger. At first I thought it was a nail hole, but the edges were too smooth, too intentional, like something had created it carefully, purposefully. I leaned close, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness inside the hole. It was deeper than I expected, like the wall wasn't solid, but hollowed out in a way that didn't match the blueprints at all. As I stared into that darkness, I felt a faint movement of air brush against my cheek. Warm air, breathing air. I jerked back so fast I almost fell over. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound died in my throat. My father had warned me, never talk near the walls, never tap them, never listen too long. Now all those rules felt less like paranoia and more like survival. I forced myself to look again, this time from a distance. The hole wasn't random. Something had made it to observe me. It pointed straight toward the couch where my father used to sit every night, staring at the same wall. Suddenly his strange habits weren't strange at all. The house creaked behind me, a long, low sound like wood bending under weight. I spun around, but nothing was there. Nothing I could see, at least. The air kept shifting in small ways. Little temperature drops, faint smells of copper and dirt, the kind of scents that didn't belong in a closed room. and every time the air changed, the house seemed to exhale. I knelt again. I shouldn't have. But some part of me needed to know. I whispered, "Is someone there?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, faintly, something inside the wall shifted. Slow, controlled, like it was choosing to answer without sound. And that was somehow worse than hearing a reply. I stood up fast and backed away, unable to take my eyes off that small hole. Whatever was behind the wall wasn't guessing I was there. It knew. It had always known. All my father's rules came flooding back, clearer than ever. No listening, no tapping, no talking, because the house listened to everything. And something inside it answered. As I turned to leave the room, I noticed something new. Thin, fresh scratches running along the floorboards, leading deeper into the house. What do you think the creature wants? To warn him or hunt him? The scratches on the floorboards stayed in my mind all day. I tried to tell myself they were old, that I just hadn't noticed them before, but the wood still looked fresh, like something with sharp nails had dragged itself across the floor only hours earlier. When night came, that thought settled into my chest and refused to leave. I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was waiting for the sun to go down. By the time darkness filled the windows, I was already on edge. Every small sound felt louder. Every shadow seemed deeper. I kept the hallway light on, telling myself it was just for convenience, but really, I didn't trust what the dark might reveal. The mini-hook echoes from before, those scratches leading deeper into the house, pulled my thoughts back again and again. I tried to sleep, but the silence didn't last. It started with a soft drag under the floorboards. Not fast, not random. Slow, steady movement, like something crawling beneath me. I held my breath, listening. The house answered with another sound. Light breathing, coming through the vents in a rhythm too controlled to be the wind. Then came the first branch snap outside my window. It was quick, sharp, and too close to be anything natural. The woods around the house were dense, but nothing heavy should have been moving through them at night. I sat up, heart pounding, listening as the forest went completely still. Even the insects stopped, and then the whispering started. It came from the vents, so soft I almost missed it. A faint shape of a voice, broken like it was trying to form words but couldn't. The sound drifted from one vent to the next, moving through the walls as if searching for the right place to settle. I froze, staring at the metal grate on the far wall. "Dad?" I heard myself whisper before I even thought about it. Right away the whisper in the vent shifted. It tried to copy me. Not perfectly. Not yet. It stretched the sound like whoever, or whatever, was behind it was shaping its new voice for the first time. The mimicry wasn't close enough to fool me, but it was close enough to make my skin crawl. The smell of copper filled the room again, just like the night before. I stood slowly, afraid to make noise, afraid not to. My feet touched the cold floorboards, and somewhere beneath me, something reacted. Another scrape, this one longer, as though it sensed I was on the move. I crept toward the vent. Every step I took, the breathing inside grew louder, more excited, or maybe more curious. I dropped to my knees, my heart thudding so hard it felt like it might shake something loose inside the wall. "Stop," I whispered, even though I didn't expect anything to listen. But something did. The breathing paused. Then a new sound replaced it. A slow, steady knock. 3 taps. A pause. 3 more taps. It wasn't random. It wasn't the house. It wasn't even trying to hide anymore. It was communicating. I stumbled back, knocking over a small table. The crash echoed down the hallway, and right away I heard another sound. Footsteps in the wall. Fast, sharp, following the noise I just made. That's when I realized the truth I didn't want to accept. Nothing about this thing was accidental. It wasn't just moving. It wasn't just listening. It was choosing. And when the footsteps stopped right beside me, the thing in the wall pressed against the panel so hard the wood bowed outward, like it wanted to step through. The wooden panel didn't break, but the way it bowed outward made it clear. Whatever was behind the wall wasn't afraid of being seen. I backed into the corner of the room, barely breathing, waiting for the wood to crack open. But after a few seconds, the pressure eased and the walls slowly relaxed like someone had taken their hand away. I knew I should have run out of the house right then, but something kept me frozen. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was the way the house had shifted into silence again, like it was waiting for my next move. That silence became the mini hook pulling me deeper, the sense that the thing inside the wall hadn't left at all. It was just choosing the moment to show itself. I forced myself to step into the hallway. The light flickered as I passed, dimming for half a second, brightening again. The air felt heavier there, thick and warm, filled with that sharp copper smell that didn't belong to old wood or dust. The farther I walked, the more I felt like I wasn't the one exploring the house anymore. Something was guiding me. Halfway down the hall, I heard a faint scraping. Not fast, not loud, just enough to make me stop. The sound moved along the inside of the wall parallel to my steps. When I stepped forward, it followed. When I stopped, it paused too. It wasn't hiding now. It was walking with me. A soft breath drifted through a tiny crack in the drywall, brushing against my arm like warm fog. I jerked back, but then I saw it. Two faint, reflective shapes inside the crack. Eyes. Not glowing bright, not fully visible, but shining just enough to catch the light from the hallway lamp. They blinked. I swallowed hard and whispered, "What do you want?" The eyes shifted. Then a voice came through the wall, broken, low, stretched too thin to sound human. It didn't come out as words at first, more like fragments of sound bending in the wrong direction, trying to shape something familiar. I stepped back, shaking. The voice shifted again. This time, it almost formed a name, not mine, not my father's, just a sound, a broken attempt. I should have run. I knew that, but something made me walk closer, maybe just to see if it would speak again. Before I reached the wall, a shadow slid across the crack, long, distorted, bending like a person crawling sideways. The lights flickered again. That's when I saw the shape of its hand press against the inside of the wall, not fully formed, fingers too thin, angles too sharp, like it was trying to remember how a hand was supposed to look. I stumbled backward and hit the opposite wall. My heartbeat felt too loud, too heavy, like it might draw the thing even closer. Then the voice came again, this time clearer. Still not a word, but a perfect shape of tone, a perfect copy of the fear in my own voice. It was mimicking my breathing now. Slow, shallow, unsteady. The house felt like it was leaning in, every board creaking at once, every shadow stretching longer. The air shifted again, bringing another wave of metallic smell, stronger this time, like the thing behind the wall had moved closer. I whispered, "Stop," and instantly the mimic stopped too. But the eyes didn't blink. They only widened, like it was learning. Then, with perfect timing, the wall whispered, clear, smooth, and unmistakably human, a voice that wasn't mine. The voice spoke my name exactly the way my father used to say it, matching not just the sound, but the emotion behind it. Hearing my father's voice come through the wall froze me in place. It didn't matter that it wasn't really him. Hearing my name said like that, soft, patient, almost tired, pulled something heavy out of my memory and dropped it right in front of me. For a moment I couldn't breathe. It felt like the house had reached into the past and dragged it forward. That was the mini-hook that pushed me into the next terrible decision. I had to know what my father had been hiding. When the voice went quiet again, the hallway felt colder than before. The eyes behind the crack didn't blink or move, but they didn't fade either. They just watched, waiting to see what I'd do now that the creature had spoken. I stepped away slowly, not turning my back to the wall until I reached my father's old room. The door still creaked the same way it had when I was a kid, long and drawn out, like the house didn't want me going inside. Dust covered most of the furniture, but nothing looked disturbed, except for one corner of the room. A stack of papers lay half hidden beneath the old dresser. They shouldn't have been there. My father kept everything tucked away neatly. Anything left out was something he meant to revisit, or something he never got the chance to hide. I knelt and pulled them out. Most were old receipts and notes, but tucked between them was a page torn from a notebook. The handwriting was rushed, almost shaky. "Do not open the vent. It listens. It remembers. It waits for him." My stomach dropped. Him. There was no one else that could mean. I flipped the page over, hoping for some kind of explanation, but the only thing written there was a rough drawing, lines showing the layout of the house, but different from the real one. In this version, behind the walls and under the floor, there were narrow paths carved out, like tunnels. Like someone had mapped the hidden spaces where a person shouldn't be able to crawl, but something had. I felt the floor shift beneath my knees, a slight vibration that moved across the boards. I stood quickly, backing away from the dresser. The smell of metal drifted through the air again, faint but familiar. The house was aware of me, and it didn't want the papers touched. I went to the hallway closet next, the one my father always kept locked. The key was still on top of the doorframe, exactly where he used to hide it. My hands shook as I unlocked it. Inside, instead of blankets and coats, I found something else. The vent cover, the one from the living room, the one that should have been on the wall. Someone had ripped it off, or something had pushed it out from the inside. Deep scratches covered the metal, long and uneven, like whatever marked them didn't have a steady shape. The edges were bent outward, not inward. Something had forced its way into the house, not out. Behind the cover, I found a small wooden box. I recognized it immediately. It was my grandfather's. My father used to say it held nothing important. But when I opened it, I found something wrapped in cloth. A handful of old items from my childhood. My missing toy car. A button from the jacket I lost when I was 7. A strand of hair that looked like mine. Items I had never recovered. Items the creature had kept. My hands went numb. Then, from the living room, I heard tapping again, but not on the wall. On the floor. Slow. Deliberate. Coming closer. As I turned toward the sound, I realized the tapping wasn't random. It was tracing a path, leading me toward the crawl space under the house. The tapping along the floorboards drew me toward the crawl space like a voice calling without sound. Each tap sounded patient, steady, like it had all the time in the world for me to follow. My father always told me to stay away from that part of the house, but his warnings felt less like advice now and more like a final line of protection I was crossing. That realization was the mini-hook pulling me deeper. Every step I took felt like a step towards something my father had spent his life trying to keep from me. The crawl space door was low and narrow, tucked beneath the living room windowsill. I had to kneel to reach it. Dust covered the frame, but the lock was clean, as if something had touched it recently. When I pulled the handle, the wood gave easily, almost too easily, and a cold draft drifted out, carrying the smell of dirt and metal. I clicked on my flashlight and shined it inside. The beam cut through a long, cramped tunnel of wooden beams and packed soil. The floor was scattered with debris, twigs, dust, and shapes I couldn't quite make out. The air felt thick, dense, like it had been sitting undisturbed for decades, except it hadn't. Fresh scratches lined the wooden beams, long grooves dragged deep into the grain. They followed no clear path, just wild, overlapping marks, some high on the beams where no human could reach without crawling upside down. I swallowed hard and crawled inside. The space was tight enough that my shoulders brushed the beams. The dirt pressed cold against my palms. My heart pounded so loudly it echoed in the tunnel. I moved slowly, flashlight shaking in my hand. The deeper I got, the louder the house above me seemed to breathe. It creaked, shifted, groaned like it was reacting to my presence. Then I saw them. Bones, not whole ones, just pieces. Small fragments scattered around like something had chewed them or snapped them apart. Some looked like animal bones, but some were too smooth, too shaped, too close to human to ignore. My stomach twisted. The creature had been feeding down here, or collecting. A faint sound pulled my attention, a soft scrape ahead. I lifted the flashlight. the beam trembling across the narrowing tunnel. That's when I saw it. Two reflective eyes staring from the far corner, round, unblinking, cold light bouncing from their surface like glass catching the sun. They didn't move when the flashlight hit them. They only widened, adjusting to the brightness. And then it inhaled. I heard it. A long, slow breath. Almost human, but not. My own breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. Couldn't blink. The creature shifted slightly, just enough for me to see its outline, a shape too long to be a person, too thin to be animal, limbs bent at angles that didn't belong in nature. Its skin looked pale, almost stretched, clinging to bones that didn't form a normal frame. Then it mimicked me. Not with words, with breathing. A perfect copy of my panicked inhale. It wasn't guessing. It wasn't trying. It knew exactly how I sounded. The tunnel vibrated as it shifted its weight again. Dirt crumbled from above and dust filled the beam of my flashlight. I crawled backward instinctively, but the creature didn't move toward me. It only watched, studying, like it was deciding something. Then it spoke. Not clearly, not fully, but a whisper formed in a way a throat shouldn't bend. "Lou, deeper." My blood turned cold. It knew I could hear it now. It knew I understood. As I aimed the flashlight back into the corner, the creature slipped out of sight with impossible speed, leaving behind something small and metallic on the dirt floor, something with my father's initials etched into it. Should the narrator continue or escape? The sight of my father's initials on that small metal piece sent a shock through me. I didn't pick it up. I just stared at it in the beam of my shaky flashlight, feeling the cold dirt press into my palms. The creature had left it for me, on purpose, not dropped, not lost, placed. That was the mini-hook dragging me deeper. Whatever was living under my house wasn't just watching me, it was guiding me. I swallowed hard and crawled forward until my fingers touched the metal. It felt warmer than the surrounding soil, almost like it had been held moments earlier. My father used to keep a keychain with a little metal tag he carved himself when he was younger. I hadn't seen it in years. I thought it was lost. But now it was here, in the crawl space, in the creature's territory. A soft rustle echoed to my left, and I froze. The beam of my flashlight trembled as I turned it toward the sound. Nothing, only shifting dust and beams warped over time. But the creature wasn't gone. I could feel it. Its presence pressed against the darkness like heat from a fire you can't see but know is there. I crawled deeper without meaning to. Something in me needed to understand what my father had feared all those years. The tunnel grew tighter, forcing me to lie almost flat against the dirt. My breath echoed in the small space, too loud, too fast. Then I heard something strange, a soft whimpering sound. I stopped instantly. The sound wasn't coming from me. It wasn't the creature either. It was a child's cry. A sound I recognized, my own voice, or at least a perfect mimic of it. It cried the same way I did when I was 7 and woke up thinking someone was whispering behind the walls, the exact same pitch, same panic, same broken sob. The noise pulled at a memory buried so deep I didn't even know it still lived inside me. "Stop," I whispered, voice trembling. The crying stopped immediately. Something shifted again, fast, scraping against the beams with unnatural speed. The feeling of being watched became so strong I almost turned around, but then I saw something ahead. A hollow chamber carved into the earth, larger than the tunnel I crawled through. I slid into it, heart pounding. The chamber smelled of damp soil and old wood. My flashlight cut through the darkness and landed on objects scattered around the floor. My childhood things, a toy truck, my missing books, a worn-out shoe I'd lost near the woods, even drawings I'd made in school. My belongings, arranged carefully, almost tenderly. I stepped closer, confused and terrified. Why would it keep these? Why would it hide them here? My father always told me the house remembered things. Was this what he meant? A sudden rush of air swept past me, strong enough to kick up dust. My flashlight flickered as something large moved behind me. Fast, deliberate, circling the chamber without touching me. I turned, but the creature stayed just outside the beam, its outline stretching across the curved walls. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't running. It was showing me something. The creature's breathing deepened, steady and low, like it wanted me to understand something I couldn't yet grasp. My skin crawled as the flashlight caught the edge of its form, too long, too thin, moving with strange, fluid steps. Then it reached out. I didn't see the whole arm, only the shadow of it brushing the dirt near my father's keychain. A gesture, a motion, an invitation. My heart slammed in my chest. I took one step back and hit the wall of the chamber. Before I could move, the creature lunged, not to attack, but to grab my wrist and pull me deeper into the hollow darkness. As it dragged me forward, I realized something horrifying. It wasn't hunting me. It needed me to see something hidden even deeper in the house, something it had been protecting me from all along. Being pulled into the darkness should have felt violent, but it didn't. The creature's grip wasn't tight or painful. It was steady, almost careful, like it didn't want to hurt me. That terrified me more than any aggression could have. Whatever lived under my house wasn't acting like an animal. It had purpose, awareness, intent. And that was the mini-hook pulling me into the next moment. It wasn't dragging me to kill me. It was dragging me to show me something. My flashlight shook wildly as the creature pulled me around a narrow bend in the crawl space. Dirt scraped at my elbows, and beams creaked above my back. The air felt warmer the deeper we went, like I was moving towards something alive. Then the creature released me. I stumbled forward into a small chamber, bigger than the last, reinforced with old boards and strange carvings etched into the beams. Not shapes, not symbols. Scratches arranged with intention. Patterns, spirals, lines intersecting in ways that made my stomach tighten. My flashlight landed on something hanging from one of the beams, tufts of fur, dried and brittle, tied together with pieces of twine. Next to them were small bundles of sticks arranged like crude figures. I didn't understand them, but I recognized fear when I saw it. These weren't decorations. They were warnings, markers, boundaries. The metallic smell grew stronger, mixing with the scent of old earth. I stepped closer, shining the light along the wall. Scratches covered every surface, deep grooves, long claw marks that cut through wood hardened by decades. They weren't random. They formed pathways, connecting one wall to another. Almost like writing. A chill crept down my spine. My father had once told me our house remembered things. But this wasn't memory. This was history. Movement behind me made me turn the flashlight. The creature was crawling along the ceiling, its limbs bending in unnatural angles, gripping the beams with long, narrow hands. In the flickering light, it looked wrong in every possible way. Skin stretched thin, joints working backward and sideways, bones shifting beneath the surface like water. Its head twisted toward me, and for the first time I saw its eyes fully. Not animal, not human, not dead, just aware. When the light landed on its face, it didn't shy away. It leaned into the beam. That was the moment everything I feared became undeniable. This wasn't just some creature. It was something that lived between forms, something that watched, something that learned. A skinwalker. I backed up until my shoulders hit the carved wall. The creature tilted its head, the motion too fast, too sharp, like it was trying to study how fear moved through me. Then it opened its mouth, not wide, not monstrous, but wrong. The jaw shifted with a grinding sound, and a low hum escaped its throat. The hum turned into a broken whisper. Then the whisper stretched into a shape. My name. But this time the voice wasn't copying my father. It was mixing him with me, both tones layered together. It was showing me it could be anything it wanted. The chamber walls groaned as if reacting to its voice. Dust fell in soft clouds. The carvings on the beams seemed to vibrate. Something deeper in the house responded with a low rumble, a sound that made my skin crawl. The creature crawled lower, its limbs bending like they had no joints at all. Its face hovered inches from mine, its breath warm and uneven. It didn't attack. It didn't threaten. It simply watched, studying me, waiting. Then its jaw shifted again, and in a distorted voice that made my chest tighten, it whispered, "See. All." My flashlight flickered once, then steadied. I realized it wasn't just showing me itself. It was preparing me. Before I could step back, the creature extended one long, shaking hand and pointed toward the darkest corner of the chamber, where something moved that wasn't it. The creature's long, shaking hand stayed pointed toward the far corner, but it didn't move closer. It just held the gesture, waiting for me to see whatever else was lurking in the chamber. My flashlight trembled in my grip, but I forced the beam toward the darkness. That's when the mini-hook tightened around me. The thing in the corner wasn't another creature. It was the house itself, changing. The wood in that corner wasn't solid like the rest. It shifted, bending inward, as if the walls were breathing again. The carvings along the beam spiraled into a deeper set of scratches I hadn't noticed before. They weren't patterns. They were marks of struggle. Desperate clawing, as if someone had once tried to escape from inside the wall. I stepped closer without meaning to, drawn by something between horror and understanding. The creature remained still above me, its limbs wrapped unnaturally around the beams, its eyes wide and reflective, catching every flicker of my flashlight. I felt its attention like heat on my skin. Finally, I turned the light fully on it. For the first time, I saw all of it clearly. Its body was too thin, stretched tight over bones that weren't arranged right. Shoulders too high, ribs too narrow, limbs bending in ways a human skeleton couldn't. Its skin had a pale, dry texture, cracked in places like bark. Its fingers were long and uneven, as if they changed shape depending on what it needed. Its face wasn't really a face, more like a suggestion of one, a stretched mask of features that flickered between human shapes and something deeper. But its eyes looked like mine. Not exactly, but close enough that my stomach twisted. This thing had watched me for years, studied me, learned me, and now it was using pieces of me to communicate. "Why me?" I whispered. The creature tilted its head, slow and smooth this time, like it understood. Its throat moved, and a low, rumbling breath filled the chamber. Then, in a voice that mixed my father's tone with my own, it whispered, "Yours. To see." I shook my head. "See what?" It crawled down the beam, limbs bending around the wood like water flowing down stone. When it reached the ground, it didn't stand, at least not at first. It unfolded itself piece by piece, rising to full height with long, shaking limbs that made the chamber seem smaller. It walked toward me. Its steps were wrong, too soft for its size, too controlled, each movement precise. Its body swayed like it was adjusting to gravity. When it stood inches from me, it bent forward until its face hovered level with mine. And then it spoke again, clearer than before, a voice shaped with intention. "Truth. Here." It reached behind me and pressed one bony finger against the scratched wall. A low vibration hummed through the wood beneath my shoulder, resonating into my bones. Suddenly, I wasn't looking at marks on a beam. I was looking at a message, one carved through time, through generations. My grandfather, my father, me. We had all been part of whatever this creature was holding back. The walls shifted again and the chamber's air turned cold. A faint knocking sound echoed from somewhere deeper in the house. 3 slow taps, then 2, then 1. A pattern I didn't recognize. The creature stepped back and lowered its head, almost like a bow, almost like apology. Then it spoke one final broken phrase, "Choice. Soon." Every hair on my arms rose. A choice meant consequence, and whatever lived in the deeper darkness was waiting for my decision. Before I could ask what the choice was, a loud crack echoed above us, and something massive began shifting inside the walls overhead, moving toward the chamber with purpose. The crack in the wall above us echoed like a warning, and the creature stiffened. Its head snapped upward, and for the first time since I'd crawled into the chamber, I saw something like fear in its posture. Not panic. Something colder, something older. My pulse hammered in my ears. That moment became the mini hook pulling me forward. Whatever was coming through the walls wasn't the creature, and the creature knew it. Dust drifted from the ceiling as something heavy shifted overhead. The boards groaned under its weight, slow, dragging movements like a body scraping through a space too tight for it. I backed toward the carvings on the far wall, clutching the flashlight so hard my hand trembled. "What is that?" I whispered. The creature didn't answer. It simply moved closer to me, placing itself between me and the sound above, its long limbs tensed, its posture lowered like it was preparing to defend instead of attack. The realization hit me hard. All this time, I had thought it was the threat. But something else was in the house, something my father never talked about. The ceiling above bulged downward, the wood bending like something was pressing from the other side. A low groan filled the chamber, not a voice, but a movement that felt alive. The creature hissed softly, a sound that came from deep in its throat, protective and warning. That was when the truth started to surface. My father hadn't been afraid of the creature living in the walls. He had been afraid of what the creature was holding back. The rumbling in the beams grew louder. The narrow space around us tightened as dust cascaded down, settling in my hair and on my flashlight. I pressed against the carvings, feeling the grooves dig into my spine. I didn't want to understand them, but I did. They weren't warnings, they were instructions. Desperate instructions left by hands that had clawed until they bled. Hands that might have been human. Hands that might not have been. I turned to the creature. "What do you want from me?" It looked back at me with eyes that shifted faintly. My shape, my tone, my father's shadow. But this time, there was something else beneath the surface. Not mimicry, not copying, memory. It pointed at the carvings. Slowly, intentionally. "Yours," it whispered. "Line. Yours." "My family?" I breathed. The creature bowed its head once. Suddenly, everything made sense in pieces that hurt to put together. My grandfather building the house strangely fast, my father's sleepless nights, the rules I wasn't allowed to question, the items from my childhood carefully collected beneath the house, the creature watching me through the walls since I was young. It had known me, known all of us, because it wasn't hunting us. It had been preparing us. A thunderous crack split across the ceiling above. The wood tore open just enough to reveal darkness shifting inside, something too large to fit, something moving like a long, twisting mass that didn't have a single form. The air grew colder. The smell of metal intensified. Even the creature recoiled. "What is that?" I whispered again, my voice barely audible. This time the creature answered in a voice that sounded like both me and my father, and something more hollow beneath. "Shadow. Before you. Before me." My breath shook. "You mean it's older than you?" The creature didn't nod. It didn't need to. The chamber vibrated as the thing inside the beams pushed again, cracking wood, spilling dirt. The house wasn't just shifting anymore, it was reacting. Every board groaned like the structure itself was trying to hold something in. I felt my father's keychain in my pocket, still warm from where I'd held it earlier. Warm like it remembered who it belonged to, warm like it wasn't done being used. My father had left this house to me because he knew this moment would come. He knew the creature couldn't face the other thing alone. He knew I'd have to make a choice. The creature leaned close, whispering one last warning. "Truth. Yours now." And as the ceiling above us finally split open, I realized the truth wasn't just about the creature. It was about who I was to the thing breaking through the walls. If this was you, would you run or stay? The ceiling split wider, spilling dirt and rotten insulation into the chamber. The beams above groaned like they were being pried apart by something too heavy, too strong, and too determined to stay hidden any longer. I stumbled back, covering my head as chunks of wood rained down. The creature beside me, thin, bent, trembling, didn't move away. It stood between me and the thing above, as if shielding me from whatever was trying to break through. That was the mini-hook pulling me forward. The creature wasn't preparing to attack me. It was preparing to protect me. A long, low growl echoed through the beams, vibrating through the dirt under my feet. It wasn't the creature's voice. This one was deeper, older, a sound that felt like it came from the bones of the house itself. My flashlight flickered as the air thickened with the smell of copper, dust, and something else. Something sour and ancient, like damp earth that had never seen sunlight. The ceiling bulged downward again, and through the split I saw movement, a shifting, twisting darkness that had no shape. Or maybe it had too many shapes to understand at once. It slid across the beams like a shadow that wasn't connected to anything, bending and stretching in ways that made my chest tighten. The creature hissed at it, a raw, warning sound. Whatever was coming didn't stop. I backed into the carved wall again, my hand brushing across the deep scratches left by people who had been trapped here long before I was born. The thought hit me hard. Those marks weren't just instructions, they were desperation. My family hadn't been chosen for this house. We had been trapped by it. The creature turned to me suddenly, its eyes shifting, reflecting something human and something not. It lowered its head until it was inches from mine. For the first time I felt it trying to communicate not with mimicry but with meaning. "Blood remembers," it whispered, its distorted voice shaking. "I don't understand," I said, trying not to let the fear break through. It reached toward my chest, not touching, just hovering, its trembling fingers pointing at my heartbeat. Then it pointed toward the twisting shadow above us, then to the carvings behind me, then back to me again. Piece by piece, the truth came together in my mind like a cold, heavy weight being set in place. My grandfather hadn't stumbled into this. My father hadn't stayed because he wanted to. My family had been bound to this house, to the creature, and to whatever it was trying to contain. The scratching in the beams grew louder. Suddenly, a plank snapped, and a long, dark shape forced itself halfway through the opening. I didn't see a face. I didn't see limbs. I saw movement. Constant, wrong, shifting like a living shadow searching for a shape to imitate. The creature lunged upward, slamming its thin body into the beam with a screech. The impact shook the chamber. Dust fell everywhere and the shadow recoiled, twisting violently before retreating back into the darkness of the wall. The creature stayed hanging from the beam, breathing hard, its body shaking from the effort. It looked fragile for a moment, vulnerable. But when it dropped back down beside me, its posture straightened, and those reflective eyes fixed on mine again, this time with urgency. "Finish," it whispered. "Finish line." My voice cracked. "What line?" It pointed again at the carvings, at symbols cut deep into the wood in a straight, uneven pattern. They weren't just markings. They were meant to be completed. By someone who shared the blood of the ones who carved the first half. My family. The creature gently pushed the old board toward me, revealing the final uncarved space, like a missing piece in a pattern that bound the house together. Everything inside me twisted. I didn't want this. I didn't want any part of what my father had carried. But the shadows in the walls moved again. Harder. Angrier. The house itself groaned as if something massive was shifting through every beam at once. Whatever was trapped in the structure was waking up, and if the pattern didn't hold, it would break free. The creature placed my hand on the final piece of the carving. As my fingers touched the old wood, the entire house seemed to inhale, and something whispered my name from inside the walls. A voice I had never heard before, but one that knew me. The whisper from inside the walls made my whole body lock up. It wasn't the creature's voice. It wasn't my father's. It wasn't anything that should have known my name. It came from deep inside the structure, vibrating through the old beams like the house itself had spoken. That was the mini-hook catching me before I could breathe. Whatever hid behind the walls all these years had finally awakened. My fingers hovered above the unfinished carving. The old wood felt warm, warmer than it should have been in the cold dirt chamber. The warmth pulsed, slow, steady, matching my heartbeat. The creature watched me with shaking limbs, its eyes reflecting a mix of fear and expectation. Above us, The entire house groaned, the sound rippling through the beams. Dust rained down. The shadows inside the broken ceiling twisted again, pressing against the remaining wood, searching for a weak point. I felt the pressure rise in the walls, like something massive was pushing to get free. "I can't do this," I whispered. The creature leaned closer, its voice barely holding its shape. "Blood. Must." I shook my head. "Why me? Why my family?" It didn't answer. Maybe it couldn't. Maybe the truth was too old, too tangled for words. Instead, it lifted my hand again, gently but firmly, guiding my fingers to the carving. The unfinished section seemed to throb beneath my touch. Then the house shuddered so violently that the chamber floor shook. A long tearing sound ripped across the walls above. Wood splitting, nails screeching, beams cracking under pressure. The thing inside the walls was forcing its way out. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging everything into a dim glow of reflected eyes and shifting shadow. The creature hissed, placing its thin body between me and the place where the ceiling sank inward. Its bones cracked as it stretched into a defensive shape. Another whisper came, clearer this time. "Let me out." It wasn't pleading. It wasn't questioning. It was promising. The creature trembled, its limbs bending back in angles that looked painful, even for something not fully human. It struck the beam again, trying to reinforce it, but the wood splintered under the pressure coming from the other side. I felt the walls pulse like a heartbeat. My family hadn't just lived in a haunted house. We had lived inside a barrier, one that was failing. My father spent decades holding this thing back. My grandfather before him. They carved into the walls not because they wanted to, but because they had to. And now it was my turn. My hand moved on its own. Whether it was instinct, fear, or something deeper in my blood, I didn't know. I dug my fingernails into the wood and began to finish the carving. With each line I scratched, the pressure in the walls changed. Not eased, focused. The crawling shadow above us lurched violently, slamming against the beams, making the chamber rumble. The creature bent low, crying out in a distorted voice as if the sound of the carving hurt it. When I finished the last line, the house didn't calm. It screamed. Every board groaned at once. Every nail shuddered. The air grew so cold my breath formed clouds. The shadow overhead went wild, thrashing against the walls with a sound like bones breaking underwater. Something shifted behind the freshly completed carving, a click, deep and final. The creature stumbled back as if struck, eyes wide. The chamber walls brightened with a faint glow, lines of light threading through the carvings. The shadow in the ceiling recoiled, shrieking without sound as the glow spread upward, weaving through the beams like veins of fire. The entity inside the wall began retreating, not willingly, but like it was being pulled back. The whole house heaved one last time. Then everything stopped. Silence collapsed into the chamber. The glow faded. Dust settled. The shadow disappeared. The creature lowered itself to the dirt, trembling hard enough that its bones rattled beneath its skin. It looked at me with a strange, hollow expression, something like relief, something like regret. But the silence didn't last, because somewhere deeper in the house a single knock echoed, soft, slow, intentional. And when the creature turned its head toward that sound, its voice broke into a whisper I'd never heard from it before. A whisper filled with fear. Not gone. I'm older now, old enough that my hands shake when I try to hold a flashlight, and my breath goes thin when I climb stairs. But even after all these years, I still remember that last knock inside the house. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, it was patient, slow, like whatever was still in the walls knew I had finished my part, and was letting me know it hadn't left. That's the part I need you to understand before I go any further. People think fear is the thing that keeps you awake at night, but it isn't. What keeps you awake is unfinished business, the kind you can't outrun, the kind you inherit whether you want it or not. When I left the house that night, I didn't look back. I didn't pack anything. I just walked out the front door and didn't stop moving until the woods thinned and the road came into sight. The sky was still dark, but it felt brighter than anything inside the house ever had. I thought distance would save me. I thought breaking the carving's pattern or finishing it, whatever I had done, would keep the creature in the walls from reaching me again. But the truth is, the creature wasn't the problem. It never had been. You don't forget the sound of something protecting you. You don't forget the way it moved toward danger instead of away. And you don't forget the look in its eyes, not human, not animal, but aware, when it realized the thing in the walls wasn't gone. I left Ridgetop that night and never returned. I didn't attend the estate meetings. I didn't reclaim the keys. The house stood empty for years until someone finally bought it at a price too low to make sense. I never learned their name. I never tried. But even now at 58, I still hear things sometimes. Not voices, not words, just tapping. It happens late at night when the world goes quiet and my thoughts drift back to the crawl space and the carvings and the long thin shadow that looked at me like I was part of it. 3 taps, a pause, then 2. Always the same pattern, always soft enough that I question if it was real. But the tapping isn't the worst part. The worst part is the breathing. Some nights when the house settles and the heater clicks off, I hear the faintest sound behind the walls. A slow inhale, then a long, uneven exhale. Not close, not yet, but present. Like something is learning the layout of this place the same way it learned the last one. I've spent years telling myself it's just memory, just the mind replaying old fears. But the smell gives it away, the faint metal scent that doesn't belong anywhere near my new home. It rises through the vents the same way it used to back in Ridgetop. Light at first, almost nothing, and then stronger, like a reminder. I'm telling you this because I don't think it's finished with me. I don't think bloodlines end just because you leave a house behind. Some things follow, some things wait, and some things learn the shape of you so well that distance becomes nothing more than a straight line it hasn't walked yet. The creature that lived in my walls, the one everyone would call a monster, protected me from something worse. But it's not here now, and whatever was trapped inside that house, whatever whispered my name through the beams, whatever waited through 3 generations for someone to finish the markings, I think it remembers me. Last night, just before dawn, I heard that same soft knock behind my bedroom wall. 3 taps, a pause, then 2. And this time, when I held my breath to listen, the knock wasn't followed by silence. It was followed by footsteps, slow, careful, learning the rhythm of my house. I don't know what it wants. I don't know how long it's been here. I don't know if the creature that once protected me is still alive somewhere out there. But I do know one thing. If you ever hear tapping in your walls, don't answer, because once it learns your sound, it never forgets.